Hi everyone, this is Pamela. I'm a sports science consultant for Horizon and part of the nutrition team at the LJMU High Performance Unit. And today I'm going to talk to you about nutrition for recovery and how you can optimize your recovery by eating the right foods at the right times. And the first thing I'm going to cover is the 3 R's of nutrition. So when we think about recovery, we want to think about three main things, so three main aspects. The first one being refueling, which we cover that with carbohydrates. The second one is repairing, which we cover that with proteins, and rehydrating. And obviously we think about fluids and electrolytes when we wanna cover that. So after a training session or a match, your body needs all these nutrients to recover, to support that recovery process. And each nutrient, as I said, will cover a different process. So for optimal recovery, we want to make sure that we think about all these three aspects. Touch rugby, as you are very aware, is a high-intensity sport and has high physical demands, therefore has high carbohydrate demands as well. So when you train or you compete, you use the carbohydrate stored in your muscles. And if that storage becomes depleted, then that will lead to fatigue and exhaustion. So what we want to do is maximize that storage so you don't run out of it and you're ready for the next game. In terms of recovery, obviously, when you feel properly or when you have that adequate carbohydrate storage in your muscles, then we know that players usually have high running speeds, they cover more distance in a game. The pass accuracy is much better. They maintain mental function, and overall this leads to improved performance. So we wanna obviously have that covered, right? Where do we find carbohydrates, or how can we include carbohydrates in our diet? So there's main groups that will provide some, especially fruits, starchy vegetables, grains, which is breads, pastas, oats, rice, and foods like that. Beans and pulses are a good source of carbohydrate as well, sugars and sweets, and then we have specific sports foods and supplements. Such as energy gels or sports drinks will be a good source of carbohydrates. And again, eating carbohydrates after touch, training or a match helps that recovery process by refilling those carbohydrate stores used. So if you had a game and then you have another game in a couple of hours, then what you want to think about is how to get the carbohydrate stores full again, or as full as you can within that time frame, to start the next game with better stores, if that makes sense. So again, this supports the performance for that upcoming match or upcoming training session, if you have a training session in the next day. So here in this page, you'll find two very simple examples of how you could use the carbohydrates for adequate refueling. And obviously, when we think about carbohydrates, we would need to think about how much we did or what the work was. We call it fuel for the work required, which is only eating carbohydrates, the amount of carbohydrates that you actually need for what you did or what's going to happen next. So let's say that you have a hard training session. So within the first hour after that hard training session, then you want to think about refueling, right? So sports drinks or chocolate milk will be a good source of carbohydrates. Plus, they will either provide they both provide fluids, and the chocolate milk, for example, will provide also protein. So good example for combining a few recovery aspects. Then within the 3 next hours, you think about having some like normal complete meal with high carbohydrate foods, ideally something like pasta with tomato and sauce and beef, just one example. On the other hand, if you do a light training session, just a very short one, more skill-based, nothing very demanding, then what you can do, obviously, you didn't use as much carbohydrates on this session, so you won't need to refuel those stores. Then that's when you think about just drinking water. It's not important to refuel those carbohydrate stores. And then within those 3 hours, you obviously wanna recover as well, but you think more about proteins rather than carbohydrates. And when we talk about proteins, again, those are the building blocks of muscle tissues. So when we train or when we have a match, our muscle fibers get damaged. So we wanna help them recover. Therefore, we provide proteins for this process. Where can we find proteins, or what proteins can we eat? Again, lots of different options. Main food groups that will provide proteins are animal-based, so eggs, milks, dairy, meats, and plant-based, like beans and pulses are a good source of proteins, also a good source of carbohydrates, and then soy and soy products are a good choice too. If you're looking for sports supplements or sports food or supplements, protein powders will be an easy one to add. And for optimal recovery and just for optimal muscle maintenance, what we want, or the optimal goal for proteins, is to have it every 3 to 4 hours. So think about your day, think about the meals you have in a day, and think about adding 20 to 40 grams of protein on each of these meals. Again, this is just one example in the amount of protein it provides at the bottom, but it doesn't need to be this. But again, just so you get the gist that it's important to include that every 3 to 4 hours, and then you can kind of include your training sessions within this time. And the third one is rehydration. And why is this important? Because when we exercise, we lose water and electrolytes through sweat. And during a match or during a training session, depending on how long or how heavy this is, fluid losses can be very high and can go as high as 2.5-3 liters per hour. Again, this is very individual, and every person is different and will have different sweat rates. But it is important to think about this. If you know that you sweat a lot, then probably you need more fluids. If you don't sweat as much, then you might not need as much rehydration, but still is important to cover this. And again, if we are dehydrated, then this will lead to fatigue and ultimately impacting performance, which is what we want to avoid. This is just a simple graph to show you how dehydration can affect performance depending on how dehydrated are you. So starting with the 1% water loss or weight loss, you'll have trouble focusing, you have impaired ability to regulate body temperature, and you'll start feeling a bit thirsty. So these are some of the key signs to keep an eye on. If you take it one step further, 2 to 3% water loss or weight loss, you have up to a 20% reduction in physical performance. So not that big of a difference, but massive difference in terms of performance, right? So something it's very simple to cover, very simple to kind of avoid, and yet it has a big impact. And on this stage, you'll also have impaired mental performance, which is reflected by affected memory and reaction time. Then a step further, then it's up to 30% reduction in physical performance, where you get effects on muscle endurance and strength. And then again, as we take it further down the line, then we have more serious effects on performance and even health. So again, the point with this information is that we try to start our sessions and our matches in a well-hydrated state, and that we try to keep our dehydration to a minimum of 2%, not more than that, because we want to avoid having that big effect on performance when we are playing. So what fluids or what drinks can you use? Depends. Depends on how heavy the session was, how much you sweat, and what you have going on next, right? So water, think about water as your go-to fluid, and depending on the carbohydrate needs, then you can use fruit juices or sports drinks. Or let's say that you're having this after your training session and it was a heavy training session, then milk or chocolate milk will be good alternatives as well. And again, when to drink, it's important to drink throughout your training session to minimize that dehydration process, and again, to keep it to a minimum of 2%, and regularly throughout the day, so you can start your sessions in a well-hydrated state. So putting everything together, then this is just an example of how a double training session will look like. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on all the meals, but you can see that all of these meals and at these time points will cover the carbohydrate needs for refueling, the protein needs for rebuilding, and the hydration for rehydration, right? So double training session day and then a tournament day nutrition example too. Same concept, just to give you some ideas of what you could do if your day looks like this. And yes, just same day, and then just the last meal of the day, same thing. Everything covering hydration, covering carbohydrates, and covering proteins. So again, as I said, this is what you want to think about when you want to recover optimally. And I hope you find this useful. Let us know if you have any questions, and get in touch. Thank you.